Oh, yeah. All right. So we are live on Facebook. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to expert session number 8 here with myself and my guest, Kelly Alexander. Kelly and I met about 2 months ago in a mastermind meeting, and we got talking about taxes and finance and money and all the good stuff. And I was just like, I've got to get Kelly's message out to the masses. So here we are. And Kelly, just really quickly, welcome to the show. And I'm really excited for our conversation today. What got you into taxes, finance, and the whole world of money and wealth?
Well, thank you, Josiah. It's a delight to be here. I'm looking forward to sharing what I've discovered with your audience. And when I got my very first job at age 16 at a fast food restaurant, like many of us at the beginning of our work life, I was given a W-4 form. And I looked at it. And it said on there, if you did not owe taxes last year and you don't expect to owe taxes this year, you can write exempt from withholdings. And I thought, wow, there must be a way to be exempt. Well, I found out that there are several ways to be exempt, but fast forward 35 plus years as an adult, I have done a lot of research and have uncovered an absolutely extraordinary remedy to income taxes. Many people come up with or have a gut feeling that there's something about our tax system that just doesn't feel right. And they come up with theories, they do some research, and then they'll test a theory and then they get in trouble. And people go, it just adds to, the sort of the herding mindset that we just have to bow our head down and grind away and conform to our current tax system. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today is a different conversation than you've ever heard before. It's going to sound too good to be true, and I'm going to, address your concern, some of the concerns about it, but I've discovered something remarkable. So
Awesome. I'm real excited
just a high level.
Yeah, real excited to dig into that. Too good to be true is one of those once in a blue moon, it seems, it actually is true. And that's what I'm real excited to dig into today in this conversation. So, we'll start off with, I guess, maybe give us some basic structure around how your particular strategy applies. If you want to take us all the way back to whenever it was when they first wrote the tax code, where's best to begin this saga for you?
Well, first I'm going to ask a few questions. How many of you listening would actually like to keep your hard-earned money instead of giving it to the government? Or how many of you get frustrated or feel overwhelmed at tax season while you're tracking and categorizing and figuring out how to get the most deductions from the tax code that you can? These are things that have become normal for us as taxpayers. And so I'm going to present to you the legal and ethical basis for why what I'm going to share with you is viable, it's tested, it's proven, and I even guarantee it. So there's 3 big ideas I'm going to bring to you today. The first one is that there are actually 2 distinct currencies that are operating in our economy. The one that we are most familiar with is the Federal Reserve notes. That's what we're carrying around in our wallets. Those have been in circulation since 1914. And they are issued from the Federal Reserve Central Bank. I'm going to refer to them as the red money. So, Federal Reserve notes. The other currency is the currency that our Constitution authorized our Congress from the very beginning foundations of our nation to issue directly into the economy without a Federal Reserve or a central bank. That currency, I'm going to refer to it as the green currency. A little hard to see. Well, it's green on a green screen, so.
Right?
It,
Red and green.
yeah,
Go.
right. It's referred to as lawful money. And it just means lawful because originally lawful money meant gold coins or silver coins. In our modern era, that definition has broadened because we are no longer on a gold standard to include the paper money that our Congress is authorized to issue. In our modern era, they are known as United States notes. So the big idea is that because the Federal Reserve notes that are issued incur an obligation on the US government and we as citizens to be paid back and paid back to the Federal Reserve at interest, though that is the currency that is subject to the income tax. The United States note currency that comes from the Congress directly does not incur that obligation. It doesn't have to be paid back. It doesn't have to be paid back at interest. It's a reflection of the productivity and the goods and services that we, participants in the economy, provide.
This is the green money.
This is the green money. This is the United States notes. The green money, because it doesn't come with an obligation, it is exempt from the income tax.
Exempt, as in?
It's a mind blower. As in when you use the green money, you do not become liable to pay the normal, traditional annual taxes to IRS or your state income tax.
That sounds
good.
I
know. Yes, it's otherworldly, and this is why I said I know this is going to sound too good to be true. The reason that it's true is because of banking law. It is not found in the tax codes. The tax codes are for those people that use Federal Reserve money. In 1913 is when the Federal Reserve Act was passed into legislation. Before 1913, there was no IRS. The two are married together. It is an alliance that is never ever talked about, whether it's our education system, financial services, the media, the political arena. You're not going to hear that. And that's because it's a very well-kept secret. So the law that this is based on comes from, I'm holding it up in my hand, and unfortunately it's not reading well on my camera. It's from the United States Code, Title 12. Title 12 is the banking law, and it's subsection, yes, 12 USC 411. I encourage any of you interested in this to look it up. This law came into being in 1933.
1933?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Title 12, United
1933 is one.
1933.
Yeah, 411 is the subsection. Yeah. So basically, in 1933, something very significant happened in our country. We were going through the Great Depression. FDR was in office, and the country was actually going through a complete restructuring, very similar to a bankruptcy. And at that time, FDR put out an executive order requiring the US citizens to turn in their gold certificates, anything that they had in gold in exchange for Federal Reserve notes that would no longer be backed by gold. So in order for them to make such an unequitable exchange, gold for paper, they enacted this Title 12 subsection 411 statute. So what this statute says is that Federal Reserve notes shall be redeemed in lawful money on demand at the Treasury Department in Washington, D.C., or at any Federal Reserve bank. So it's telling us that there's two currencies, number one. It's telling us that Federal Reserve notes can be redeemed for the other currency, the non-taxable one.
For the green
And
money.
that
We can swap
for
red
the
money for
green
green money.
Yes, yes. And that it's up to us to make that demand either at the Treasury or at any Federal Reserve bank, which includes our local bank, you know, whether all of the banks are connected to the Federal Reserve at this point in time. So that's the legal basis. So the second big idea is that the income tax, while it's been around for all of our lifetimes and our parents' lifetimes, and most likely most of our grandparents' lifetimes, the income tax was not in existence prior to 1933. This is a relatively newer normal relative to the history of our nation. The founding fathers never envisioned or wanted a central bank, you know, controlling the money supply and, you know, running the show, so to speak. They knew the perils of a central bank from Europe. I mean, that was part of their life experience. And that's a big reason they came to the New World, to have greater freedom. So now, to be fair, there was a tug of war from the beginning of the country up until 1913, and there were some temporary charters given by our Congress to a temporary or a central bank on a temporary basis. And what's fascinating is that every time a charter was given, a revenue board sprang up simultaneously with it to collect revenue. And that's because central banking and income taxes, they go together. The IRS, well, the third big idea is that the IRS, you know, I'm going to share with you its actual purpose and role and where its authority begins and ends. So anyway, yeah, back to, you know, what's normal now is not what was normal for a bigger chunk of our history than the last 107 years. And
Okay.
that's where, you know, as a coach, I help people, you know, unlearn and detox from the conditioning that we have been doused with, you know, our whole lives. You
Right,
gotta pay your
taxes,
fair
right?
share.
That's what's certain.
Yeah, death and taxes, those are the only absolutes. And what I find interesting is that well, I'm going to say for some reason, which I will call gut instinct, people are most disgusted with the income tax. You know, we have sales tax, we have property tax, we have excise taxes, we have gasoline taxes, we have utility. I mean, there's a ton of other taxes that we're paying over and above income tax, but people don't rail against those emotionally and viscerally the way that they do with the income tax. And I think that is just a little sliver of intuition saying, hey, maybe this needs to be studied or looked into more deeply, because there is a speck of truth in that emotional reaction to income taxes. So that's what I work with on people, is helping to show that. Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
and what really sparked your desire to seek truth, to dig deeply into, like, if I feel like this is so wrong, why is that?
Well, for me, it didn't start with taxes. It started with health. When I was 19, I had a so-called incurable disease, and I was studying some spiritual, mystical literature at that time in my life. And I used the knowledge that I was learning from this totally alternative, non-medical perspective, and I healed myself in less than 48 hours.
48 hours?
48 hours. I had a virus. I had the herpes simplex 2 virus. It was horrible. And I went to the doctor. They told me that I would have this the rest of my life. There was no cure for it. I was just going to have to, wait out this first episode. And they prepared me that, I'm sorry, but you're going to have reoccurrences, off and on forever. So I lived it out, and about 6 months later, I could feel the early sensation of a second outbreak. Just kind of a tingly, itchy sensation. I go, oh. And that's when something just came over me, and I used the healing knowledge that I learned from this other source that sounds like woo-woo stuff. All I did was, for those 2 days straight, is I talked to the disease, and I told it, you are not welcome in this body. Get out now. You have no purpose here. You're not welcome here. I just did that every free moment that I had. And like I said, within 2 days, that little tingly sensation, it went away. I never had an outbreak. I have never had an outbreak since. I have never had a fear that I would have an outbreak. And that was a big pivot point for me personally. There are alternatives out there that we're not taught. We're conditioned to, follow the leader and get in line with everybody else, and safety in numbers. And, in some contexts, safety in numbers is absolutely life-saving. But there's other areas where following the herd is not. So that started, and then my whole life has been about alternative remedies. I started getting glimmers of information, about citizenship, that there was more than one kind of citizenship, and, other things in the health world. And, it just made me want to explore and want to get to the truth. That has been the most, an exciting part of my life journey, is at least the feeling of coming closer and closer to it. And with the taxes, I've been living this for 7 years personally. I have paid 0 income taxes for 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So some might say, trial and error in this case might, they'd be afraid that it might result in trial and audit.
Yes.
What is someone's alternative or someone's solution to that fear? And I would argue that a lot of fear comes from a lack of knowledge, comes from a lack of understanding, and so your quest for this truth really does a lot to alleviate that, knowing that that's not the case.
Right. I mean, obviously, trial and error is a problem, or can be a problem. And so, I've created a simple process. The technicalities and the mechanics of this is simple. It's more about the mindset shift and really understanding the law and how and why it works and how and why it evolved. And I handhold people, through those steps. And I think I'm, a great guide for that, because I have lived it. I have gone through the fear. And to be perfectly transparent, I did some other trial and error tax remedy, so-called remedy, before I learned this, and I got into deep doo-doo with IRS.
Mm.
So that was part of my learning curve. It was part of that feeling of there's something about this that isn't right. I want to figure it out. I think most people that went through what me and my husband did when we did that first exotic thing, most people would just curl up and say, okay, I'm going back to the fold. And for whatever reason, it was just in me to keep going and keep going. And now I'm so glad that I did.
Yeah, that's so incredible. And in a way, it seems like, as you mentioned before, so many of us look at income tax much the same way that you experienced this virus, this illness, where it's like there's got to be a way, out of this. And so that's a very interesting parallel when you look at it that way.
Well, on that note, I would encourage people to really look at the actual science and the actual definition of a pandemic. A pandemic, by definition, means that 3% of the population has died as a result of it.
Mm.
We are not in a pandemic.
Well, that's a welcome
Definition.
anecdote. It's not a direction I was expecting to go, but you mentioned strength in numbers, and I said, well, some right now would argue about that. but on that note,
there's a lot of there's a lot of discussion on both sides.
Sure.
But do research.
Absolutely.
Do research.
Yeah, no, knowledge is power. Applied knowledge is better.
Yes. All right. I don't want to interrupt you. Go ahead. Ask me.
No, I don't want to. I didn't want to derail this too much, but I definitely wanted to dig into some of those more anecdotal kind of aspects. So, so you found all this out. You discovered these. I don't want to say new truths. They've always been there, and then they've been kind of shielded, if you will, because I didn't learn about this in college. I didn't learn about it in high school. It wasn't in my textbooks. None of the CPAs I've talked to, and I'm personal friends with a number of very qualified and adept CPAs. I've worked with people that have gotten me a lot of money back, in a sense. And a lot of people, and this definitely is due to our conditioning, would say, well, isn't it my duty as a citizen to pay my fair share in taxes to keep the roads up and to pay for our emergency services? And there are some healthcare proposals out there that would actually put some of our hard-earned tax money, if you will, into providing healthcare for ourselves, and so many other things that we're told that our tax dollars are going to. So from a moral or ethical standpoint, where does that fit into doing our part, so to speak?
Yeah, great question. So what people don't realize is that all of the money collected by IRS, and this you can verify in the Grace Commission report that was put out in Reagan's administration in 1984. All the money collected by IRS goes straight to the Federal Reserve as payment for interest on our national debt. It doesn't actually go to cover the healthcare, the roads, all the various government services and programs, that are in place. Now, part of the reason that the government has so much debt is because they keep borrowing the credit of the Federal Reserve. They owe it back at interest. The interest is never created, so it creates this perpetual debt cycle that expands and expands and expands. Our national debt is up to over $27 trillion now, which is pretty far beyond what a human mind can wrap their head around.
That's a very large number.
So it's a very large number. So the things like the schools and the police and the fire and those things, property taxes pay for that. Gasoline taxes pay for roads and transportation and bridges and those kinds of things. Utility taxes pay for the infrastructure for our utilities and those services. The income tax itself is there only to reckon with the debt that we owe to the Federal Reserve Bank, which is unnecessary. We do not need a central bank. We have it because the bankers that created that legislation learned after a century plus throughout the 1800s, they learned how to sell it to the American people and especially the Congress, which passed it. It's an unnecessary organization. It's not even federal. It is completely private. Contrary to its name, Federal Reserve, it is not a government agency. That's another misdirection of information. It's private. So, I mean, how did the country operate before 1913? It operated just fine. In fact, in some ways better. I mean, we've evolved in a lot of ways. Obviously,
Sure.
we've evolved industrially and technologically, but economically, our dollar was worth a full dollar then. Now, compared to 1913, purchases about 2.5 cents worth of goods and services that was available in 1913 and before. Inflation is the direct result of the monetary policy that the Federal Reserve has put in place.
Wow.
So the ethical element of participating in the remedy that I'm talking about is that it actually helps the government lower its national debt using the lawful money United States notes. It starts to create a more honest monetary policy because it chips away at the power of the Federal Reserve. It's my position that it's going to take a critical mass of people doing this process to have a noticeable impact. And just like the definition for pandemic, it only takes a small percent of aware, committed people to make positive change. Actually positive or negative, it doesn't, either, it could go either way, but in this case, it would be positive. So we're helping our government, we're helping ourselves, we are helping lower inflation, we are helping return to a more honest monetary policy. The issue with the Federal Reserve notes is it's considered, well, it is an elastic currency, which means they can spread it out as thin as they want to. That's why $1 only purchases 2.5 cents worth of value from 100 years ago. That's what an elastic currency results in. A non-elastic currency, which the lawful money is, it's finite. Like the cryptocurrencies, those have a finite supply. Boom. And that's why their value actually at this stage in their evolution continues to rise, because people are learning and there's more demand and it looks like an alternative, to our banking world. So that's where people can feel good, not like they're getting away with something sneaky for not paying their fair share. Fair share, to be honest, your fair share of income tax is zero. We pay other taxes. Those are fair. Those are legitimate, constitutional. I'm not saying the Federal Reserve is unconstitutional. It's just that the way that it's operating, people don't know about the choices that are available to them.
So you're saying it's the
So,
ethical thing to pursue this remedy in order
yes,
to drive towards that critical mass of actually reversing the damage that's been done by the Federal Reserve.
yes. Yes, there's a great book for people that are interested in more of an expose on how the Federal Reserve functions. It's called The Creature from Jekyll Island. You know, for the nerds among us, I being one.
Well, you have to be a nerd, and that's why we appreciate them
Yeah,
so much, because they're able to,
well,
you really dive into these kinds of things, and then you bring it to us, and we have a conversation about it.
right, right. So, yeah, yeah. So what else? Um, I mean, I could go on. I want to kind of give a chance for people to take their breath, for you to process what I've said and ask me another question, or,
Yeah, well, so a lot of people are looking at, okay, well, it's one thing to see red money and green money as paper specie, if you will, but we live in such an electronic age. It's like, I don't have a check or your cash from my employer that I can say, I want to redeem this for green money. So how would something like that work if someone was to come to you and say, how do I not pay tax on this money, or income tax, rather?
right. So yeah, that's a great question, because what I didn't express yet is, how do people make this demand for the other currency? So in the old days, when everybody used checks for everything, we were taught to turn the check over and endorse the back with our signature. So that endorsement, the way that we were taught, is called an unconditional or naked endorsement. It means that we are voluntarily admitting that we are using the Federal Reserve notes, that we're endorsing that system, and that we are pledging our substance, our future labor, our assets to cover the national debt if there was a nationwide financial collapse. That's something we're not taught either. So what I show people how to do is a restricted endorsement. And instead of it being only your name, it has some legal terminology on it. It comes right from the Title 12, subsection 411 United States Code. And you just write, lawful money is demanded pursuant to 12 USC 411. And then you sign. That is the beginning of your liberation from that system. If you have direct deposit, most people do who go to a job and receive paychecks these days. They don't get a physical paycheck. It's automatically entered into their bank account. For that, there is something called a direct deposit authorization. You filled it out when you first started working with your employer, and it gives your account number, your routing information, and you sign that. And I just show you how to do the same thing as if you were endorsing a check. It's the same process. It's just on one sheet of paper, and it applies from the start date for as long as you have that job, for as long as you receive that direct deposit. Or if you're a property manager and that manager sends you, the rent money, it's not only for employees, but there are other places where direct deposits are used.
Sure.
For
And
people that have yeah.
so, yeah, for instance, like you said, some of my work is in real estate. So if you have a landlord getting that income from, direct deposit from their tenants to a corporation, how does that work? Or would that be after they structure out their W-2 from their corporation themselves? Or
Okay, the corporation can demand lawful money. However, I don't, for those that have an S Corp or a C Corp or some other entity, those entity tax filings remain the same. But whatever filters from your corporation to you, the individual, whether you pay yourself a wage from your business, or you receive K-1 distributions or shareholder distributions, those will all show up on your 1040 tax return, the individual personal. And that's where I come in and I teach how to fill out the 1040 at that level. The entity stuff can stay the same.
Okay. So what about, like, say, capital gains tax or inheritance tax, things like that? Is that applicable to that income as well?
Any income, earned income, passive income, capital gain income, portfolio income, you won the lottery, you found it under a rock somewhere. If it's income and it goes into your bank account and it would otherwise be taxable in the tax code, this process can be applied to all of those sources of income.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That sounds
Money
pretty
is money.
wide.
It's based on the currency.
So you do you work as a CPA, and is that part of what you do in terms of, like, tax filing and things like that, or what really got you into this specific niche as a finance advisor and things like this?
Okay, so I am not a CPA. I have no licenses or official designations whatsoever, and I am not seeking any. I am an educator. I have researched this, I have tested it, and I've put it into practice. I have been challenged by IRS and prevailed. Something that I was praying would happen before, before too much time went by. Actually, it took them 5 years. And it was so exciting to submit my reply, and they went silent. Completely silent. No letter, no phone call, no nothing. There is a tool that IRS has available on their website, irs.gov, where you can open up an account with them, and it shows you the status of each of your tax years going back in time. If you owe money for this year, you have a refund for that year, whatever. So I went on there recently just because I check periodically. And the 2 years they challenged was year 2017 and year 2018. And I owe a zero balance on both of those years, and every year that I've been filing this way, which is since 2014. So it's just so empowering it's actually right in the memorandum of the IRS. They have a whole list of what they call frivolous positions that some taxpayers take. And it says right in there that some taxpayers claim that Federal Reserve notes are not taxable. That's correct. That is a frivolous, flawed position to take. The opposite is the truth. You cannot say that Federal Reserve notes are not taxable. They are the reason the IRS exists.
Okay.
So, and that's where the language, you have to get a little bit comfortable with reading, legal, technical things, so you get what they're really saying. They have clever ways of presenting it. Like, people will see Federal Reserve and go, oh, well, you can't do that. Read it word by word, look up words if you need to. Actually, I recommend that all the time. Like, you raised the word pandemic, look it up. What's the real definition? There are street definitions, layman definitions, and then there are legal definitions, and they are worlds apart. If you're really interested in law, get a legal dictionary. And the older it is, the better it is. Yeah.
So on that note, in terms of, like, legal definition and case law, are how many legal professionals are out there that A, understand this particular strategy, and B, really work with the taxpayers, work with the public at large to implement and or defend against any kind of IRS audits or questions about this particular strategy?
Okay, there's very few. So you asked me originally about CPAs. CPAs are very smart, highly educated, and by and large, very helpful for their clientele in, managing the IRS debt and, getting what they're allowed to receive from the deductions in the tax code. CPAs are experts in the tax code, which is Title 26 in the United States Code. The reason that CPAs are not aware of what I'm talking about is because it's outside their area of expertise. Banking law is a whole nother body of law, separate from the tax code.
Banking law. So that's the second time you've mentioned that. Can you give us a little more perspective on what that?
Sure. So the United States Code is a body of federal statutory legislation. I believe there's 50 or 51 separate titles. Each title is dedicated to a certain area of law. So like Title 15 has to do with debt collection. Title 26 has to do with the Internal Revenue Codes. Title 12 has to do with banking law. Title 18 has to do with criminal law. Title 31 has to do with money and currency. So, each title is a certain area of the law. Now, the IRS tax codes are constantly changing and growing. There currently is over 86,000 pages of tax code. That is more than any dozen CPAs collectively could master. So CPAs, they specialize in certain parts of the tax code, and then their client base is a reflection of that, portion of the population that is in that league or that category or whatever. A CPA for a small business is going to be a different CPA than, say, for Jeff Bezos of Amazon.
Sure.
It's just, there's just too much to master it all. So the people that know about what I'm sharing are top level people in the banking world, and they don't do taxes. That's not their area. Because there is a connection, yes, it affects the taxes, but tax attorneys, again, their specialty is like IRS, taxes and tax law. So that's why there's a disconnection that is rarely brought together. And that's why my second big idea is, the two currencies is so, it's like, it's eye-opening beyond words. Yeah.
Right. So
Does that help? Does that give you a better?
Yeah, no, that's very, very well stated, because like you said, there's so many different things out there that
One thing I wanted to add.
Right, they want to go down to H&R Block to get their taxes done, and no one there knows banking law. It's not like it's not their job.
It's not their job. It's a whole different ball game. So I met a gentleman who's in the insurance world and other alternative tax strategies, and he knows a very high-level Wall Street financial regulator, and he brought to her what I had shared with him about my business and what I'm doing, what I've discovered. And he asked her about it. He says, what do you think of this? And she says, oh yeah, Title 12, 411. She says, that was written by J.P. Morgan. She says, yes, you can do that. So people up in the banking world know.
Okay.
But she's not in the tax business.
Right.
she's in the business of financial regulation and banking and that sort of thing. So,
Okay.
that was
So
that
from
was
this
nice
point of
nice to hear.
expertise, from this point of expertise, do you coach, consult with CPAs, accounting firms to work with their clients to find these remedies, or is this more of a
I
one-on-one with
I
the taxpayer?
haven't Yeah, I haven't yet, but I am beginning to meet some CPAs that are interested in learning more about it. I think my guess is, this is a guess, maybe 5% of CPAs would be open, to learning more about, this world. And I'm sure if they want to learn, I'd love to share with them. And they know depending on who their client base is, you know there's a lot of factors in that. But I find in general so far the people that are drawn to what I offer are already alternative minded in some way. I have What's fascinating to me, a high percentage of my clients happen to be vegetarians. Now, there's no connection between vegetarianism and taxes, but there is a connection as far as alternative thinking. People that are in the cryptocurrency world or the cannabis world or just alternative solutions to things, they tend to gravitate more naturally to what I do.
I would say
So,
entrepreneurs at large.
someone that
Do you agree?
entrepreneurs, yes, most of them are entrepreneurs, and the clients that I have that are wage earners, they have some kind of a side thing. So the mindset of an entrepreneur is in them. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So anybody with a
yeah,
side hustle or is, especially since like they're the ones that are going to be taking on that tax burden for themselves because of the difference in how that's structured.
well, what's sad, or just the way it is, I don't know if I should label it sad, is the reality is the people that are wage earners are hit hardest by IRS taxes. They don't have
Oh, absolutely,
business deduction, you know.
absolutely. And then
So
the minute you incorporate, you cut back what 32% of your tax burden because you're able to convert all those
mhm,
expenses into business expenses.
yeah, yeah, yeah. At least businesses have that, but there's 32%, and then there's
Zero.
95,
Yeah, or
100%.
95, yeah.
I mean,
So what you're saying is there's still Medicare tax and Social Security that come out.
yes, this applies to federal and state income tax strictly. Yeah.
Okay.
There are ways to opt out of those other things, but I'm not an expert in those, and so I don't teach it. And it's a whole nother world of learning. Maybe someday I'll get there.
Well, I know a few people in the tax and legal realm in terms of all that maybe get some what do they call it, symbiosis going on
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
really help their clients and really expand and raise awareness for this particular remedy that you're so passionate about.
Yeah. Yeah. My hope is just to begin raising awareness and causing people to be curious and to look deeper and question more and explore. Just keep exploring. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the dying um, phrases, if you will, of any business organization or strategy is we've always done it this way. And
Right.
especially we've seen this year, if you don't innovate, you die. We've seen
Yeah.
it with Blockbuster. We've seen it with a number of different brick and mortar chains,
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
and it's really crazy to see how they either merged with another company or they went virtual or like really got innovative or
They changed their business model. Yes. I
absolutely.
mean, so many adaptations. Yes.
Yeah, and if
Yes.
you don't, you literally, like, your business can cease to exist overnight, and we've seen that this year in so many ways.
Yeah. 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 That's with new developments. What, we've always done it this way. The key word in that is we. Doesn't mean everybody has always done it that way. And even if everybody has done it that way, doesn't mean that there's another possibility. Yeah.
Absolutely. So for our listeners or anybody that we connect with, I'm definitely going to be shouting this one from the rooftops. How would they get started with a strategy like this?
Well, there's a few ways to connect with me. You can go to mytaxremedy.com. I have a little e-booklet that describes the concept that I've shared with you today. And then you can subscribe to my email newsletter. My email is info@mytaxremedy. And for anyone that would like to have a free lesson on how to make their very next paycheck or payday exempt from income taxes, I'll offer that to you. Just say that I heard the sharpshooter expert session uh, hosted by Josiah, and I'll be more than happy to share that with you.
Awesome. Yeah, and I put your contact info in the caption for our live here. I'll be putting it in when this posts to, different channels, so people can get a hold of you through those avenues as well. So to kind of dig in a little bit deeper to, like, the nuts and the bolts of it, is this something that then, if we pursue this strategy and then we take that to our CPA, do you have CPAs that you work with that you would recommend to someone who's looking for a new CPA if there's maybe isn't as open to these creative measures?
Okay, so you do not need a CPA unless you unless you have entities that you want someone else to file on your behalf. If you have a CPA and that part works, stick with it. You do not need to find another CPA in addition to me. I will coach you and work really closely with you on preparing your tax return, your individual 1040. If you have back taxes or back tax issues, I can recommend people to work with you to clean those up, because this process is not retroactive, not beyond the current year. So for those people in that category, it's actually preferable to come to some kind of payment plan or settlement or something to address some old IRS debts first before you embark on what I have to offer. But what I do is, from the present or from this year going forward, I can help you for the future. So, but yeah, any tax professionals, tax attorneys, I can make really good recommendations for those.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So what else would someone need to know to really get started with this? You mentioned the form that they fill out, and as you said, you don't need a CPA to do your taxes if you're just a wage earner filling out a 1040. I mean, I've done it myself.
Right.
But that's
honestly, all it takes is, I like those tax softwares like TurboTax and TaxAct. That's what I use when I work with a client. Those are still considered self-prepared. Like I said, I do not have a license or, designation. It's not, I'm a coach, I'm an educator, but I will handhold you through it. I have done it, I have lived it, I have prevailed, I know the ropes. And so, that's what it would look like if this is something that called out to you. As far as what else someone should know, this process can be done in baby steps. If you're the kind of person that hears this and go, wow, this is really fascinating, you know, you might have 1 foot in and 1 foot out and you're not sure, we can apply the potential exemption as much or as little as you feel comfortable with. Does not have to be all in or all out. I had one client that wanted to do that. So, you know, that was just, and that's where, you know, I coach with people one-on-one. It's very personal, it's very customized, and ultimately it's your process, and I empower you so that you feel good and you understand and you know what you're doing, and you know, you're coming from a position of strength, not follow the leader. I don't want a trail of people just following blindly what I'm presenting. I want to work with people that want to own it. They really want the empowerment that comes with it. You know, and that's been, like I said, 7 years for me. Every year gets better. There's just this feeling of wow. And honestly, now and then I still pinch myself. It's like, wow, this is, you know.
That's what empowerment feels like. It's like, this is real.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what I would share.
Well, that's really cool. Well, we're coming into the end of an hour here already. It's time flies by when you're having fun, as they say. Um, we'll definitely be in touch more on this. I have a number of people I would love to connect you with, from my world, especially. I mean, we both know a number of entrepreneurs and people that could really use this, as well as typical wage earners. So really looking forward to making some connections for you there. And yeah, any final notes in conclusion here?
Yes, courage is one of the rarest of human traits, but without it, possibilities are not possible. And so I, you know, just encourage anyone listening to find their courage, find that spark in them that, you know, and just explore. You don't have to commit to anything, just explore. You know, take one step, be curious, look up a word. Just take a step.
Yeah, take that first step and see how far the rabbit hole goes.
Yeah.
Well, that's so that's awesome isn't even the right word. It's enlightening, it's empowering to realize that, you know, there are strategies out there, there are remedies out there, there is you know, empowerment to really take control over our financial situation. And I mean, how many people do you know that, you know, that difference in what they otherwise would have given to pay towards interest on a national debt, not even principal, interest
on
the national debt, which we all know, Albert Einstein said, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Those who don't understand it pay it, those who do earn it.
Earn it, exactly. Which side of the equation do you want to be on? Yeah,
I definitely want to be on the earning side of the equation. Yeah. So and earning is a function of, you know, putting in the work, like you say, to be curious, to research, to ask questions, and to really connect with people like yourself who can give us those empowering steps. So really thank you for your time coming on the show here and sharing your wisdom, and look forward to working with you a lot more in the future.
All right. Thank you, Josiah. It's been a delight to be here. Thank you so much for having me on. I look forward to connecting with your tribe, your people, and vice versa.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right.
And that's Kelly Alexander with Great American Tax Remedy. And head over her way. Check out the links in the caption here and the show notes, wherever you find this at, and take control take your power back over your financial situation, over your destiny, because it's really yours to take. That is the American dream. Expert session number 8. That's a wrap. See y'all next time.